All right, time to start stitching. Now, if you watched my setup video for these kits, I talked about splitting the floss into smaller sections. For this embroidery, we're going to use all 6 strands of floss. So that means you're just going to use the whole section right as it comes. There's 6 individual pieces here, and we're going to use all of them. So I've tied a knot in the end, and I have 602 through my needle, and we're going to start here on this outer part of the rainbow. Now we're just going to make a series of straight stitches. We're going to make a straight stitch to cover up each one of these little lines. So I'm going to come up on the outside of the line. I'm going to pull my thread all the way up, and then I'm going to go down on the other side of the line. And I'm just going to repeat that for every line along the rainbow. Up on the outside, down on the other side. So just keep coming up. There we go. And then down on the other side. Let's talk about a couple other things that are helpful. First, finding where to put your needle. I know it can be hard from the front, so you can see right here, this is the tip of my needle moving around. You can do that by pushing your needle into the fabric, not down, kind of like if you're writing with a pencil. Push it down and drag it. So that can help you see where your your needle is to get the right spot. Then, we don't want to pull our needle off the end of our thread. So how I do that is I pull the needle out of the fabric with 2 fingers, and then these fingers hold the thread so that I can pull as hard as I want, which you don't need to pull very hard, and my needle will not pull off the end of my thread. Now, as we pull these down to the fabric, you don't want to pull super tight or it'll start to pull the image and make it look funky. You want to just pull it down until the stitch sits right on top of the fabric. So, I'm going to keep stitching these pink, and we'll check in a minute. All right, let's chat for just a second. You can see here that the end of my thread is getting really close to where I'm stitching. And if I just kept stitching and didn't do anything, I'd end up stitching on both the end of my thread and my working thread through the fabric, making it too thick instead of just 1 thread thick. And I want it to be 1. So before I end up stitching on this end, I'm going to move my needle along the thread. So you do that by holding just onto your needle and you pull on just the needle, and you can see now that the end of my thread is over here and not over here. So I've got more space to keep stitching. So just pay attention to where the end of your thread is, and if it's getting close to where you're stitching, you need to move your needle further along the thread. All right, I finished my last pink stitch and I've flipped my hoop over so I can show you the back. Now you could tie a knot to finish this off, but I think that's kind of difficult. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna slide our needle under a couple stitches, pull it nice and snug, and then I'm gonna go back under these same stitches. But this time I'm gonna push my needle through the floss. So I'm catching the floss, okay? And do that number 2 time, and then you're probably good at that point, but I like to go 3 times. And then all we have to do is grab our scissors, trim the thread, and you're done. Now we're gonna flip back over and move on to orange. All right, we have a full strand of 3853, your orange, on our needle, and we have a knot at the end, and we're gonna make these X's. Now the easiest way to make an X when stitching a row of X's like this is to make all the X's for all the lines for one side all the way down, and then we'll do the other side all the way back. So I'm gonna start down here in this very bottom corner, making from the left side to the right side half of our X, right? Coming up on one side, down on the other side, just like with our pink. Now we're gonna come up and we're gonna make the same line on the next X. So for the second one, we come up on the left side, and then we go across and down. And we're gonna keep doing this same part of each X, coming up on the left side, going down on the right side, all the way across. So I'm gonna keep stitching all of these. Oop, I think I got a knot. Nope, just a little tangle. Over here, and then we'll talk about going back the other way. All right, here are all of those lines, even this little one over here done. Now we're gonna do the other part of the X. So you can't see the other half of this little one. So my first one is right here. So I just finished this stitch. So I'm gonna come up right next to it. It's a little bit easier than on it. And then cross over. And you can go down into the same spot right here or just very close to it. And that makes the first cross of our X. Now we go up on the right hand side of the next one and down. Now if you look at your lines carefully, you'll notice that the top edges up here, the X's don't actually touch. They're just a little bit farther apart, and on the bottom side, they do touch. Now, you don't have to worry about that at all. You could make them touch on both sides, but it is a little bit easier if you come up just a teeny bit to the side of the stitch that exists right here, because it can be pretty easy to catch and split those threads with your needle. So let's keep making all the X's going back the other direction. All right, that is all my orange X's finished. I'm gonna tie this off, grab my yellow, and we'll get started on the next stripe. Okie dokie, yellow stripe. We're gonna do something called a laced backstitch, which is a fancy name. But to do that, first we have to do a backstitch. So we're gonna follow this center line all the way along, making a backstitch. And we're gonna do this by coming up on the very end of our line. And then we're gonna make a pretty good sized stitch and go down on the line. Now, we're gonna come up this same length along the line. We're gonna call that our stitch length. So we're gonna come up a stitch length away, and then we go down right into the end of our previous stitch. This way there's no gaps in our line. And then we repeat. We go one stitch length down the line, and then we go back into the end of the previous stitch. And we just keep doing this one stitch at a time, following the line until we get to the other side. And then we're going to lace our back stitch. Okie dokie. There's our line of backstitch. Now we're going to come up next to the end right here of our line. Just, or even that same spot if that's where your needle goes. And now we're going to lace this backstitch. So instead of using the pointy end of our needle, we're going to use the eye of our needle. So we're just going to turn our needle upside down. So this way we don't catch any stitches. And we're just going to zigzag our needle through all of these stitches to make kind of a curly QS thing, snake going on. Now this is a whole lot easier when I don't have my hoop in the stand, but for you guys to see, it is in the stand today. So I'm gonna go first to the left, and then I'm gonna pull my needle just softly until I can get that thread to sit. And you see that I pulled it a little bit too far. That's okay. You just use the eye of your needle and you can catch it a little bit and pull it back out until it looks like what you want. Okay, and now we're gonna go the other way. So the first time I went bottom to top, now I'm gonna go top to bottom. Again with the eye of my needle, slide under the stitch, push it through, pull softly. And then I'm gonna stop right as we have this nice little round there. And then we go the other way. This time, bottom to top. Pull softly. And, ooh, got my thread stuck. Now we go the other way. Top to bottom. And we just keep repeating, softly pulling our thread through. And anytime that you pull too much, that's okay. Just use the eye of your needle and pull it back out a little bit. All right, there I am woven all the way to the end, but some of these are a little tighter than I want them to be, so I'm gonna just pull them up a little bit, make them look like they go all the way to the edge. And then once I'm happy with how they look, we're gonna go down right here on the edge, next to that first stitch. And again, we're gonna pull down gently so that we don't undo all of that hard work that we just did. Now, if you end up having to pull too hard, that's okay. Just go back with the eye of your needle and adjust how things look. And that is laced backstitch. Now again, I'm going to anchor off my yellow and get green on my thread needle, and we will move on to the next stripe. All right, it's time for green. We have a full strand of 907 on our needle, which is the green. And you have already learned the stitch for here. We're going to do a line of backstitch along the top line and then a line of backstitch along the bottom line, or bottom and then top. Either way, both of these lines in the green are backstitch. So you already know what to do. So I'm going to start on the edge, come up, go a stitch length away, go down, stitch length away, come up, and then go down into the previous stitch. And then we repeat. Alrighty, there are our 2 lines of backstitch. I'm going to tie off and then we will do blue. All right, I have 3/8 for 3, the blue on my needle. And again, we've already learned what we're gonna do here with these straight lines. It's just like the pink. So I'm gonna come up on one side, down on the other side, and make a straight stitch for each of these blue lines, all the way across. Alrighty, there is blue stitched. I'm gonna anchor and then we will do purple, just like we did the orange with X's. All right, we got purple on our needle. It's 3837, and we got singing in the background. So same method for these X's. We're gonna do all of one side first, and then we're gonna turn around, come back, and do the other side. And we're done with purple, which means we're done with all of the rainbow colors. All right, next we're gonna do probably the woven wheels, but maybe the lettering. Haven't quite decided. And we'll be well on our way to finishing our rainbow. All right, I made up my mind. We're gonna do lettering first. So I have a full strand of 310 black on my needle, and we're gonna start with the letters. And we're gonna use backstitch on the letters. Now, these letters are mostly straight, right? You're not seeing a lot of curvy shapes. So I'm gonna use bigger stitches on these letters. Now you could also choose to use nice little tiny stitches. It's really up to you. When we get to the O and like the curvy part of the R right here, you'll see I have to take a little bit smaller stitches to actually make it around the curve. But for letters like this Y here, I'm just gonna use some nice big stitches. So I'm gonna start on the straight part of the O, okay? Straight part. And then I'm gonna do like one angled stitch here, a straight stitch, an angle, and a straight stitch. For stitching curvy letters, anything that has a curve in it, just tell yourself it's okay if I need to make more little small stitches so that the word actually looks like what it needs to. So now that I'm over here to the U, I can take some bigger stitches again. I'll probably do the sides in 2 stitches here, and 1 stitch along the bottom. All right. Our brain likes to stitch in the order we read. So your inclination is probably to go from right here all the way over to the S and then stitch along again. The problem with that is you'll probably end up with a little black line showing up behind your fabric where you took, it's hard to see on screen. There'd be a little black line right here of the thread behind your fabric. So it's a better choice to just go to right here and not waste any extra thread, and then stitch sunshine backwards instead of forwards. All right, I finished my letters and I tied off my black, and now we're gonna finish with the clouds. And we're gonna make something called a woven wheel. You can see we have 5 lines that come into the center and a circle. The circle is just to let us know basically when we've reached the outside. What we're gonna stitch on are these 5 lines. So I have an extra long strand of white floss with a knot at the end. And we're gonna come up on the outside of one of these 5 lines. Doesn't matter which one. And then we're gonna go down into the center. And then we're gonna repeat that. Ooh, I caught a little bit of green there. Hold on. Here we go. Then we're gonna repeat that for each of these 5 lines. I like to call them a spoke. Kind of like a wheel, the spokes on a wheel. A little shorter. There we go. So up on the outside, down in the center for all 5 lines. And then what we're going to do, our next step is going to be to weave our needle. Oh, there we go. There was a knot, but it came out. Is to weave the remaining thread through these lines, these spokes, until it fills in the entire circle. All right, there is number 5. Now we're going to come up in between any one of these. Doesn't matter where. So I'm going to come up right here. You can see I'm in between 2 of them, and you want to be close to the center. And pull your thread all the way up. Now you can do this with the point of your needle, but it has a tendency to get caught on things. So we're going to flip our needle over and use the eye of our needle because it's dull and it doesn't get caught on as many things. So we're going to work in a pattern. We're going to go over one, under the next one. So over, now under. So we put our needle under and you pull your thread through. Now we're working in a circle. Doesn't matter which way. I chose this way, so I'm going to keep going that way. So now I just went under, so now I'm going to go over and then under. So now I go under this one. Now again, over, under. And now I'm just gently pulling my floss until it touches the center. You don't want to pull too hard or you're going to use a lot more floss than you actually need. Over, under. Over, under. Over, under. And we keep going until we can't see any of these little lines anymore. All right, you can see that I can barely see the end of one and really not the other ones at all. So we're going to finish this one by going down, sliding my needle under here just a little bit. I don't want to come out. I want to go under and pulling the floss all the way down. Now I'm going to move to this one. Now in your instructions, I have written on the diagram what order you need to stitch these in. Because if you stitch them in the wrong order, it's going to be harder to slide your needle under because there will be other things in the way. That's why we waited to do these last. So this one's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So like I said, that's in your instructions, so you don't need to worry about remembering that. Just know that there's an order that makes this easier. So let's make our next woven wheel. We're going to come up on the outside of each of the lines. And down in the middle. So if that happens, if you catch the tail of another color and it pulls up and you've all of a sudden got some pink here or something, just on the back, scrape your needle in between the space or do it with your finger and just pull those pink pieces back out onto the back instead of letting them come through to the front. Right, now we start the whole process over again. So we're going to come up in between 2, close to the center, and then we're going to go under and over in a circle. Let's go the opposite direction this time. So I'm gonna go over, ow, under, over, under, over, under, and repeat. I just caught my thread a little bit, and you can see right here how it's kind of looking a little funky and not so circle anymore. It's because I pulled my thread too tight. So if that happens to you, again, using the eye of my needle, just take that thread that looks like it got pulled a little too tight. You might have to go back a little bit and just loosen it. You can loosen here as well where it is, and then just gently pull it back into place, and you're ready to keep going around. All right, again, we're getting to the point where I can't see any of the ends, so we need to end this one. So we're gonna go down, underneath, pull it through, and we move to number 3, which is this guy. So 1, 2, 3, then this one. Okay, so same method. All right, as they're stitching this big one, these gaps get bigger and bigger, and your thread is gonna want to go up over the stitches instead of sitting next to them. So you need to pay attention to where your thread is going. One thing I like to do is I'll slide my needle under here. I'll hold my thumb on the thread that's coming from here so that, oh, I pulled too hard. So that as I pull it in here, I can help guide it into place and then stop it where it needs to be instead of letting it flip up over the stitches that we have already done. All right, you can see I'm about to run out of thread, so I'm gonna make this last jump be the last one of this section of thread. So we're following our pattern. I just went under, I'm gonna go over, and I'm gonna go down. I can either go down here in the middle, or I'm gonna go down close to this spoke here. And then I'll tie off real quick, and we'll talk about how and where we come up. And as you pull down, if you pull too tight, remember, you can come back up here with your needle and loosen that back up so it's not too tight. All right, I'm back with new thread on my needle. So I went down right here under this spoke. So I'm gonna go up under that spoke as well, pretending like our thread went under the spoke instead of into the fabric. And now I just continue with the pattern. Over, under, over, and under. Again, you can see I'm being careful not to let the thread flip up and over it. We want it to line up along the edges. All right, at this point, you should be well on your way to making woven wheels. So I am gonna continue stitching here, and if I come up with any other tips, I'll check in. Otherwise, you are doing awesome. Keep working on it. All right, I've finished all of my woven wheels, and you can see this one here got bumped, and now you can see a little bit of this outside line. And the best way to fix that, or you'll notice that There's a lot of give in woven wheels by the time they're done. So if anything starts to look out of place, just take the eye of your needle and start pulling things out gently towards the edge, and you should be able to cover up anything that's driving you crazy. Also, you have a decent amount of extra floss, or this is how much I have left from how much I gave you. So you should be able to go back and fix any mistakes that you need to. Otherwise, your rainbow is all the way done. You did such a wonderful job. I'm so excited for you. I hope to see you around here again, and have a fabulous day. Happy stitching.